relationship between Canada and the United States.
What's the plan to get it right? Plus, At Issue looks at what could go wrong. The risk of fire looms large at an ammunition depot near Halifax, despite repeated warnings.
Well, that's not good.
A company running trips for teens promised supervision. Now it's responding to a CBC investigation. And it's Thursday, so we've got Rex. It's been one of the most highly anticipated visits since Donald Trump's election last November. Monday, Justin Trudeau will travel to Washington to meet with the new U.S. president. He will not be arriving cold. A lot of ground has already been carefully sown in the past month by other members of Trudeau's government. The CBC's Hannah Thibodeau has more on the strategy. Hannah?
Hey, Wendy. Well, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and President Donald Trump have spoken twice on the phone, but this will be their first face-to-face meeting.
Justin Trudeau was in a challenging capital today, Iqaluit, minus 39 degrees with wind chill. But Monday may be even more challenging for Trudeau when he sits down with the new U.S. president.
The emphasis of our meeting is certainly going to be on creating a strong economy and good jobs for Canadians and Americans on both sides of the border, but I'm sure that issues of security and others will also come up.
Those discussions are expected to focus on trade, the economy, and the fight against terrorism. This former ambassador to the U.S. says a win for Trudeau will be building a fruitful relationship with an unpredictable president.
I'm not looking for a trophy as much as I'm looking for respect that will ensure that when I need to pick up the phone and call the President of the United States, I'll get a direct answer.
A direct question Trudeau should ask Trump.
Mr. President, is it your objective to rejuvenate NAFTA, to reformat NAFTA? Would you prefer a bilateral agreement? You say you prefer bilaterals. I want you to know we're open to anything that can meet our mutual objective.
In advance of Trudeau's visit, cabinet ministers descended on Washington for high-level meetings.
Well, I think Americans intuitively understand the strength of the relationship, but the specifics and the specific advantage with the number of jobs, with where those jobs are located, with the size of the relationship, that's up to us to communicate.
A message ministers have been hammering away at. Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland reminded Speaker Paul Ryan that $1 billion in goods are sent to Canada from his congressional district, and told Senator John McCain that 1 million Canadian tourists traveled to his state of Arizona last year.
We're making a strong case for Canada, and I think we have received a really warm reception.
A challenge for Trudeau? Walking into Trump's office, with Trump knowing how close Trudeau was with the last president.
This won't be the Trudeau family reunion at the White House. This will be a little different. Listen a lot, smile and nod, make a point if it's there to be made, but don't go overboard on pushing back.
Trudeau's visit to Washington is a quick one, Wendy, in and out on the same day. And how long that face-to-face meeting with Trump will be is still up in the air. Wendy.
Thanks so much, Hannah. Hannah Thibodeau. Donald Trump suffered another defeat at the hands of U.S. courts today. A federal appeals court upheld the suspension of his executive order, which banned people from 7 majority Muslim countries from traveling to the United States. The CBC's Lindsay Duncombe is in Washington tonight. Lindsay?
Wendy, the stay on Donald Trump's travel ban stays, and what that means is that people from those restricted countries and refugees can continue to come into the U.S. The appeals court decision was unanimous, and the president doesn't like it. Within minutes of the decision, Donald Trump tweeted, "See you in court. The security of our nation is at stake." The lawyers who brought the suit responded,
"We have seen him in court twice, and we're 2 for 2. That's number one. And in my view, the future of the Constitution is at stake." 3 weeks into his presidency, and Donald Trump is in an ugly legal fight. Even his Supreme Court nominee is tangled up in it. Yesterday, Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal asked Neil Gorsuch what he thought about Trump's comments lashing out at judges. Then the senator shared the answer with the media.
When he commented that these vicious, repeated attacks by President Trump are disheartening and demoralizing.
That Gorsuch would be openly critical of the man who wants to give him a lifetime appointment to the highest court is unusual. But what isn't around here these days? Take what Donald Trump tweeted after the Seattle judge halted his travel ban, referring to him as a so-called judge who put the country in peril. Many lawmakers seem to think a Supreme Court nominee having a problem with all that is a good thing.
He's not afraid to say what he thinks, and he'll be an independent jurist, and that is what we want on the United States Supreme Court.
But the president, he tried to change the subject.
Ask Senator Blumenthal about his Vietnam record. He misrepresented that just like he misrepresented Judge Gorsuch.
Phil, this is like the fourth time I've asked an answer.
And in a combative briefing, the press secretary conceded the nominee said those words, but insisted the judge wasn't referring to Trump.
The judge was very clear that he was not commenting on any specific matter, right? And then he was asked about his general philosophy. So you can't then take that, equate it back to the specific.
So what happens next in all of this, Wendy? The Federal Department of Justice says it is reviewing the decision. But remember, this is just about the stay. There is a whole separate proceeding to deal with whether or not the travel ban is even constitutional.
And on it goes. Thanks so much, Lindsay. Lindsay Dunco. One of Trump's senior advisors is being excoriated for using her position to promote her boss's daughter's clothing line. Department store chain Nordstrom dropped Ivanka Trump's line earlier this week due to poor sales.
It's a wonderful line. I own some of it. I'm going to give a free commercial here. Go buy it today, everybody. You can find it online.
All right. Federal rules prohibit anyone who works for the executive branch of government to use their position to endorse products.
Kellyanne has been counseled, and that's all we're going to go with. She's been counseled on.
There are calls for Conway to be disciplined for her remarks. There was an emergency meeting in Emerson, Manitoba today, an effort to deal with fallout from the U.S. travel ban, even while it's suspended. 22 people have snuck across the border in the last few days, braving freezing cold weather to seek asylum in Canada. And as Cameron McIntosh tells us, many more are expected.
He's loading up with clothes, blankets, and food. JP Venegas has made the trip from Winnipeg to Emerson many times, picking up people who have walked over the border.
I did that several times for numerous refugee claimants.
A former refugee from Chile, he's now senior manager with Winnipeg's Interfaith Immigration Council. He's taking supplies to Emerson to help deal with a flood of asylum seekers.
15 years ago, I was in the same shoes of these people, so I was crossing the border from the States, coming to Canada for a better life.
1 hour south of Winnipeg, Emerson has seen hundreds of mostly African asylum seekers in the past year, particularly since the fall, as many say it's getting harder to claim refugee status in the U.S. Under international convention, someone who walks over the border can legally make a refugee claim in Canada. Last weekend, in bitter cold, 22 people did, forcing volunteers in town to open an emergency shelter.
Of Emerson Franklin Municipality.
Today, the town made a new deal with Border Services and RCMP.
They assured us that they will have the manpower to handle influxes of refugees.
So what about security? All those people coming over that famously undefended border. Legally, the RCMP can't stop them, but say they are arresting them.
Those people are identified, searched, screened, those types of things. Then they're taken to CBSA where their processes take place too.
At the ports of entry, we are well positioned to deal with the traffic that comes through.
People have been turned back. Mohammed Mualim did get through last weekend. He's thankful to the community.
We really appreciate them. They also helped us. And they welcomed us. They give us food to eat. They give us blankets because they put us inside the car to be.
Venegas is hoping that compassion continues.
Basically, they have nothing. Most of the people, they just come with the clothes in their bags.
The expectation here is that it will only continue, particularly once the weather starts warming up, and so long as tensions towards immigrants and refugees remain in the south, and the border remains open here in the north. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Emerson, Manitoba.
And a different executive order has led to another court challenge filed today after work restarted on the Dakota Access Pipeline. Construction of the pipeline had been halted for environmental review, but it resumed after the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers gave the go-ahead on Tuesday. President Trump signed an order supporting the project days after taking office. The Standing Rock Sioux and the Cheyenne River Sioux have already filed lawsuits opposing the pipeline as a threat to their drinking water and contrary to their treaty rights. Coming up, when leaders meet, what can be said in private that you never say in public? Andrew, Chantal, and Jennifer Ditchburn tackle that. Plus, is this what parents agreed to when they let their teens go on supervised trips? There's a nationwide recall tonight of a popular organic baby food. The pouches are sold under the President's Choice label, and they're being pulled from shelves because some may contain a potentially deadly bacteria. Jacqueline Hansen has the details.
And I'll get you your cookie.
Stacy Kelso often buys PC Organic baby food pouches for her youngest child, Bo. But today she went back to the store and returned all of it because of Loblaw's countrywide recall.
It makes me a little nervous because I did choose them because they had never had any issues before.
The problem, Loblaw says, is too much water in the pouch, which can allow bacteria to grow and could cause botulism, a rare but serious sickness that affects the nervous system and can cause paralysis, even death.
I originally was a little worried because we did feed him all the food that was recalled.
The Canadian Food Inspection Agency says there have been reported illnesses that may be linked to the recalled products and advises parents to call their doctors if they think their babies are sick. But Loblaw says there have actually been no confirmed illnesses. Still, in a statement, Loblaw did say while the issue relates to a very small subset of products no longer available for sale, in the interest of customer trust, President's Choice welcomes anyone with uncertainty about this product to return it for a full refund.
Every baby can have organics.
PC Organics baby food pouches are sold in many grocery chains across the country, including Superstore, No Frills, and Shoppers Drug Mart. Experts say a full recall will inevitably push parents to other brands, but perhaps not for long.
If you show people that you're putting people ahead of the profits, I think this will be just a minor blip. But if they don't do that, and if they're not transparent, especially around food, this is something that we take very, very personally, then this could come back to haunt them.
Kelso says she would consider buying Loblaw's baby food again in the future, but in the meantime,
We'll just stick with the homemade food for now.
While this large-scale recall will no doubt cost Loblaw in the short term, pulling a product and fast is likely worth it when the potential consequences of not doing so for its customers and for its brand could be devastating. Jacqueline Hansen, CBC News, Toronto.
Our health team has put together more information about botulism and its effects on infants. You can find that online. That's cbc.ca/news/health. BC's Fraser Valley has seen some of the worst winter weather in living memory. Freezing rain overnight left cars encased in a layer of ice. Hydro poles and power lines were dragged down by the weight. For some school districts, this was the 4th consecutive snow day. The cleanup is underway in the U.S. Northeast after the region's biggest snowstorm of the season. Almost 60 million Americans felt the impact. The treacherous conditions caused chaos on the roads and grounded thousands of flights. At least one person died, a man who was shoveling steps and fell down into a glass door. A Canadian veteran who served on 6 overseas deployments says she was evicted from her home because of a long wait for her military severance pension and veterans benefits. The woman is not only a veteran, she's a single mother who has been treated twice for cancer. Murray Brewster has the story.
Tricia Beauchamp has what she calls a book of tours, a lifetime of military memories spent in some of the world's worst places: Afghanistan, Somalia, Kosovo, and Haiti.
I enjoyed my career to the fullest, and it really bothered me to not be able to continue in the military.
Last July, Beauchamp was medically released from the military. Like thousands of other former soldiers, she's had to wait months for pension and severance payments.
I lived off of baby bonus that comes in on the 20th of every month, and also child support of $377. And it was a decision: pay some bills or keep my 2 kids fed.
And that painful balancing act came crashing down in November. She was evicted from her rental home near Ottawa. Beauchamp has found another place to live, and she's finally getting her money, but says National Defence is not living up to its duty.
It's money owing to us, and we should be able to have it the day we leave the military.
Tricia Beauchamp is not alone. CBC News has reported on other cases, including retired Corporal Pam MacArthur in December. The backlog in military pension payments was estimated last year to be as high as 13,000 files. The average processing time is 5 months for regular military members and 11 months for reservists. A group that helps veterans in crisis says half of the hundreds of calls they are receiving come from people like Beauchamp.
I don't see anger. They should be. And I could see why they would be justifiably, but I see fear and I see so much sorrow. It's humbling to sit in front of an individual and take their utility bills and say, I'll pay that, we'll take care of it, and see them break down in front of you.
Today, the Liberals said it's not their fault there's not enough staff to push payments through.
National Defence and the Canadian Armed Forces have been cut so much to balance the previous government's budget.
Harjit Sajjan may have a valid point. The Liberals, however, will have their opportunity to fix the system once and for all in the upcoming budget. Sajjan was asked earlier this week whether the government intended to put more money into defense. All he would say was that the Liberals were committed to investing in the military. We're not quite sure what that means. Murray Brewster, CBC News, Ottawa.
The Canadian Forces are also being forced to answer for a delay of another kind, a 10-year delay in fixing problems at an ammunition depot in Nova Scotia. An assessment done in 2015 said the depot was at high risk for fire, saying such a fire would be catastrophic and potentially fatal. As Brett Ruskin tells us, the depot received the same high-risk rating in its previous assessment, too.
Personnel at the Canadian Forces Ammunition Depot are tasked with handling some of the country's most dangerous products.
We don't take any chances.
But a 2015 assessment obtained by CBC News shows the site is at high risk of a devastating fire. Trees and shrubs are too close to buildings and power lines, lightning protection systems are largely ineffective, and a water pump failed to turn on during a safety test. The report says a catastrophic fire is likely, and it may cause death of personnel, severe loss of operational capability, destruction of property, or severe environmental damage.
Projects have been initiated to address each of those deficiencies.
Initiated but not completed. Trees have still not been trimmed, and new lighting and water systems haven't been installed. This warning comes a decade after a previous report flagged similar concerns. Today, the Minister of Defence said he's not concerned.
The response that is there looks everything into account to making sure that the Canadian Armed Forces and the civilians in the area will be safe.
Kevin Power looks out on the depot from his home. This is the first he's heard of a possible catastrophic fire.
Well, that's not good. So we're hoping that doesn't happen. Obviously, they got a plan for the worst case scenario, but hopefully that doesn't happen.
The military says fire doesn't necessarily mean explosion.
The risk to the public presented by the ammunition and explosives stored in these state-of-the-art bunkers would be considered low and negligible.
And he says if a bunker did explode, it would have no effect beyond the depot. Not so, says a former operations commander.
You have an entire magazine building going on up. You will be causing damage within kilometers.
Military officials here at the ammunition depot say they will now work to reduce the risk level from high to medium or low by the next fire assessment. That's scheduled to happen in 2025. Brett Ruskin, CBC News, Bedford, Nova Scotia.
Halifax has seen munitions-related tragedy in the past. The 1917 explosion, when two ships collided in the harbor, one packed full of explosives. 2,000 people died and thousands more were injured. And in 1945, a fire broke out on a jetty at the same Canadian Forces ammunition base that Brett was just talking about. It sparked a series of explosions that lasted for 2 days. Another setback today in Japan's efforts to clean up after the 2011 Fukushima nuclear plant disaster. Officials had hoped to get their first look inside one of the damaged reactors, but they were forced to end the mission of a remote-controlled cleaning robot after high radiation caused camera problems. They're now considering their next move and a decommissioning effort expected to take decades. In Paris, there are new plans for a glass wall around the Eiffel Tower. It will be 2.5 meters high, built around the landmark's base to deter terror attacks. Officials say it will cost about $28 million, and it will replace metal fences installed ahead of last year's Euro soccer tournament. A Swedish court today convicted a TV journalist of people smuggling for helping a Syrian boy get into the country. Frederick Onneval met the 15-year-old in Greece in 2014 when he was making a documentary about Europe's migrant crisis. The teen asked for help to reach his cousin in Sweden. Onneval says it took him just minutes to agree. He's planning to appeal a judge's order of community service. An investigation by CBC News Marketplace is leading to changes at one of Canada's biggest student travel companies. Toronto-based S-Trip promises students a chance to experience the culture of the Caribbean, even to volunteer abroad. And it promises parents monitoring for underage drinking and rowdy behavior. But Marketplace found the focus of the trips has been partying, sometimes led by the company's own staff. Charles Agro reports. And a warning, this story contains material some may find offensive.
This plane is full of hundreds of high school students. Destination, Cuba. They're on their way to what S-Trip promises is a trip of a lifetime, and we're going along for the ride. The trip these 17 and 18-year-olds and their parents have been sold on promises safety and supervision with trained staff members. What they don't reveal to parents is the unfettered access to alcohol captured in dozens of YouTube videos posted by students themselves. Risky behavior, at best ignored, but sometimes encouraged. Often it's S-Trip staff setting the tone. That's them in those blue and yellow shirts on the beach. And here, leading this game, a battle of the sexes.
This may be a first time for some of you doing that, but you're going to have balls on your kids, okay?
Sadly, this isn't surprising.
This man would know. He used to work for S-Trip. He asked us to conceal his identity.
The overall safety of these students, which is absolutely driven home to parents and students, it is ignored at every turn.
S-Trip does have a code of conduct it says students have to follow. Rules this insider says were swept under the rug.
Underage drinking, sexual activity, no monitoring of who is drinking and, essentially what is going on with the students.
Oh yeah, what? You're talking about Toronto, Ontario. Are you doing?
It's this highly sexualized environment parents are worried about. Turns out, so are some of the girls we run into.
They all try to get you drunk, and then they just take advantage of you.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah, so that's why I'm not doing anything with anybody.
S-Trip wouldn't speak to us on camera, but in a statement, the company says organizing and supervising trips for this age group is uniquely challenging, and that misconduct and mistakes do occur. They go on to say they are reviewing all of their policies and procedures in light of the concerns raised by our investigation. Charles Agro, CBC News, Toronto.
Straight ahead, at issue on the crucial meeting between Justin Trudeau and Donald Trump. How far can the Prime Minister go in stressing Canadian values?